has this metal punk music, does it in any way actually influence your writing? Maybe at the beginning or even until now, today?
Well, it influenced my life more than my writing, actually. I got into this music when I was very young, probably 5, 6 years old, because going to the shopping malls in Italy, the first shopping malls at the time was back in like 85, 86. I'm born in 98. There was many records, especially by bands like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden and stuff, this new wave of British heavy metal. The records were in the store actually, and I would go with my parents. They would check for the electronics and stuff and things for the household stuff, and I would spend time browsing through the racks of records, getting very, very much attracted to the covers, not much for the music, but because of the horror themes. I mean, I've always loved horror movies, horror stuff. Maybe because as a young child, I mean, I had a stammer problem, so I was not very social, and I really liked to read books. My mother was the first person who gave me the chance to read all kinds of books that I wanted to read. I started reading Bukowski when I was 12, and that was quite fucked up for my life, you know, because I mean, you start reading about all this sex and shagging women and stuff when you're 12. So it had definitely an impact on my mind. But music, I mean, more than, let's say that having started to read when I was quite young, I had this dream that one day I would be a writer. And I was trying to write, but I mean, my things were terrible, of course. I mean, such a young boy. And when I started playing music for real, actually in a real band, I was 13 actually. I released my first 7-inch when I was 14 with this pop punk band, like singing in Italian, called Home Alone, when I was 14 in 1994. And back in the day, I was not really caring about writing or literature anymore, because I had this very early flirt with this group of writers which used to call themselves Gioventù Cannibale, which means cannibal youth in Italian. There was a movement of writers more into like splatterpunk, like let's say those things that now Fixie will publish actually. And I followed these people for a while, and then after a few times meeting them, I realized they were not as cool as I thought they were, and I just thought that because of an episode that I don't want to actually say, because I would actually get like a bad name on these people. I just totally thought that these people in Italy, they would not have any like business or do anything. And when I was 18, I wrote a collection of short splatterpunk stories called Cannibal. And there was...
How old were you then when you started?
18.
18. Okay.
There was found by the principal of the school. The principal of the school wanted to kick me out of the school because she read the stories that were full of sex, violence, torture, and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, I didn't get kicked out of the school, but I understood that writing could have been a tool to do something more powerful than just because you can actually shock and offend people. So because of the music scene, I started writing for fanzines, fan magazines, and that actually got me to meet many people and bands and stuff. And essentially, when I was 20, I started touring with the band, the Nerds, actually, my most serious band. And for the next 7 years, I would have toured. You said Europe and the UK, we toured the US also twice. I've been in 45 states between the 50 states of the US, playing music. Any town that you can think of, LA, Chicago, San Francisco, New York, whatever, I played there. So I totally took my journey, and I kind of like got close to travel because of the touring. But when you tour, you don't really have time to
enjoy
to
the
explore
scene,
because you have to go to one place and play. So you have an experience which is totally different. And about when I was 27, I got sick of the music business for several reasons. Most of all because you get to the point that you give so much, but you only get back from the people who think that they can have some benefit from you. And it's something that I see in any kind of artistic scene or society. And I just said, okay, screw it, let's move on with my life. I found an opportunity of teaching Italian in China, and I just like jump on it, that's it. And this experience, I started to travel more, and I started to write these things down in a blog without thinking of doing it in a very super professional way. Actually, if I had started doing it back then, it was 2007, today I would probably be kind of like rich because of at that time it was very much easy to position blogs in Google and stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, my journey took me here. I took some, I had some very nice experiences which led me to write these 2 books. Then I will tell you more later about it. And so the travel and the writing, very much for me, they go together. And that's why I call myself mostly a travel writer, because more than writing novels, I mean, every month, at the moment I am a full-time writer, and I write for magazines actually of travel. I mean, mostly I write about travel in Southeast Asia, in India, in Central Asia, and specifically overland travel, both budget and high-end, same, depending on the magazine I write for. And this is amazing, because if I had stayed back in Europe, I don't think I would have been able to make a career out of this.
Oh, okay, interesting. I also was talking to some people from the punk scene. So I was given the understanding that punk music was very political. So do you actually agree to that statement? And if yes, then does it actually in any way influence your current writing?
I agree to the fact of saying that since I have studied the music scene in Malaysia, and I think you spoke with Malaysians, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Punk is a very multifaceted reality, because it's a music genre that exists for over 40 years.
Yeah.
So there is a part of it, especially the anarcho-punk of the 80s, which is the base upon which Southeast Asian base their liking of the genre. But I come from a school which is more like 90s, mid-90s, garage punk, which is absolutely non-political, and is mostly concerned with beer, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So it's a very different kind of attitude to rock and roll music and punk rock. These forms of punk music, because these bands are totally punk rock, actually, the sound of it. It doesn't really take much from bands like Crass or Discharge or these kind of anarcho-punk bands, but it takes more from the rock and roll of the 50s and the garage of the 60s and 77 punk, like besides the Sex Pistols of these bands. We even think of the early first wave of hardcore music, like in the 80s, California, like Black Flag, Circle Jerks. These bands, they were political, but in a way there's more like social, they tell you, why are you doing this, stupid? Don't follow the people. Do your own thing, be yourself, but not because there is a political agenda. While most of the punk music that Malaysians are inspired by, it's anarcho-punk or crust music, which even sonically, it sounds more obnoxious. It's not as melodic or straight rock and roll. straight fun rock tempo, the kind of music that I like, sounds like. So I can say that yes, punk can be political, but that's just one part of it, actually. And this is due, in my opinion, to the way that punk music from the West has arrived here. Malaysia is the first country in Asia, probably, well, at least in Southeast Asia for sure. Maybe Japan was also very early. But having the British here before, this opened a channel that even when they left, there was still magazines like New Musical Express and stuff that used to arrive here. And the first punks in Malaysia come from Terengganu, Dungun, like Joe Kidd, which still now is in the scene. He's why one of the guru in the scene is a friend of mine. I mean, he was telling me that, I mean, back then, he was reading this magazine. So this is how the first bands, they arrive here and they impact. But after he moved to Kuala Lumpur and he met more people playing in metal bands, thrash metal bands. So the very early Malaysian music scene is very mixed in terms of territorial limits, because it's metal and punk together, and it was not that important to set genre boundaries, which these punk bands, they're very like in Malaysia and in other parts of the world, they're very like into saying, no, punk rock is punk rock, metal is metal, we don't like it. Because metal always had this idea of like the imagery of warriors and women, like scantily clad women at their feet. So there's this like macho kind of thing, no? Which punks they don't like, because they want to be overtly political, which is very boring for me actually. Because you need to think with your own mind. I mean, you cannot assume that if bands 25 or 30 years ago were talking about anarchy, you can still do it now with the same effect. But that's what I see in this kind of music. I mean, I personally do not associate myself with this music anymore, because I think it's very boring. In 40 years, it never changed. I do not want to recognize myself as a metal. Yes, I mean, I played in a metal punk band, the Nerds, but I do not believe that this music has a relevance these days, because it's everywhere. You can buy this record on Amazon. You go to shows where people pay a lot of money to go, you know, and it's a commercial. There's nothing like underground anymore. So I just quit. I mean, I prefer to go and explore India. I mean, by myself, it's much more punk than go to a punk show and wear the fucking t-shirt, you know.